A PhD is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. So it's important to ask the question if, for you, it's worth it. In this video, I'll share a little bit of my story, 3 things you should be thinking about as you consider this decision, and finally, how to decide based on these things. I'm Tony, a linguist and a PhD student. Let's break it down. I decided to go to grad school several years ago. I took the GRE, applied, got into one school, and I started my master's. I decided to go to grad school because I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to research, write things, uncover new knowledge, and spread that new knowledge for a living. I did my master's in the UK, then came back to the US, and I'll be finishing up my doctorate in a couple of years. And I've learned a few things about what the PhD is for, what you can gain from it, and what the really challenging parts of it are. A PhD is training to do research. You learn how to ask questions, put projects together to answer those questions, run the projects, analyze the results, and then report on the findings. So doing a PhD is about learning to be an academic. It's like apprenticing, the same as you would at a tattoo shop, or with a mechanic, or with an electrician. You're here at a university, working with people who've been doing this for a long time, and learning how to do it yourself. And so the model here is that you'll apprentice for several years, and then you'll go on to do it yourself independently. But the system doesn't work like it used to. The disparity between the number of graduates there are from PhD programs and the number of tenure track positions available to those graduates is much larger than it used to be. What this means is that not every PhD holder can go on to get a tenure track position, just based on the structure of the system. 50, 60 years ago, you could get a job before you finish your dissertation. Now, it's more likely that you finish your dissertation, do a postdoc or a lectureship for a couple of years, or even several years, and then maybe get a tenure track position. Because of this, there's an expanding number of jobs that PhDs are doing after their degrees. Some of these are within the university. These are called Alt-Ac, or alternative academic positions. These are the ones that are administrative, helping students succeed, helping build community, designing curricula. And then of course there's industry. There are some jobs which are research specific, such as user experience research, and there are others which might build on your research experience but maybe not use it directly, such as user experience design. So one question to ask yourself is if the career you're looking for requires a PhD, or can even make use of a PhD once you get there. But apart from what the training of a PhD is strictly speaking for, what can you gain from it? For me personally, this has looked like both personal and professional growth. Professionally, I've learned project management, because a research project, after all, is a project. And in this case, you need to do several things as part of that project. You need to determine if the question you want to ask is the proper one, if it's one that hasn't been answered, and that the field wants answered. You have to put together a team that's going to help you, your advisors, who will tell you whether or not they believe that your work is of the quality that it needs to be. When you determine that you have a good question, you need to figure out how you're going to answer it. And then, of course, you need to answer it, analyze the data, and then write up a report at the end. A research project is a lot like other projects in that you need to plan, execute, and then deliver it to somebody. In addition to this, I've learned communication skills. You're constantly communicating with people who are both higher than you, people who are experts and are helping you to learn, and then those who are lower on the ladder than you are. These are undergrads that you might be teaching or TAing for. And you're also presenting your work in various formats, whether that be through spoken presentations or posters, or informally to your colleagues, and possibly to other audiences, like if you distribute what you're learning to the public. In academia, the bar can be kind of low for spoken presentations. There's a big difference between how academics give a presentation and, say, how business people give a presentation. But all the same, you're learning to communicate, and you're also learning to work with others on teams and independently. What you're learning is to motivate yourself, drive yourself, as you both develop the question and the project, and take it through to completion. And I've grown personally as well. If there's one thing the PhD gives you, or can give you, it's the ability to ask questions of pretty much everything, and to understand the nature of coming up with the answer to those questions. This at least happens in the humanities and the social sciences frequently. Oddly, the PhD has taught me this, and this has caused me to see the PhD in a very different light. I can make a video about that if you're interested. Leave a comment on this video to let me know. But realize that you don't need a PhD to gain these skills. And this is true for most of the skills I've already talked about and the ones I will talk about in this video. I've also grown by gaining the ability to take critical feedback. In my undergrad, I once gave a presentation and didn't respond well to feedback. My professor told me that, and I've been learning to do so better ever since. Part of this growth is separating the feedback that's about you and the feedback that's about your work. Most of the times it is about your work, though it isn't always delivered in such a way as to make that clear. And so that's another part of the growth, taking the feedback without taking it personally. And finally, a huge growing point for me has been being able to persevere through pain. The fact is that a PhD can be very difficult at times. And so I've gained the ability to take that difficulty in, to deal with it, and then to keep going. This brings us to the challenges that you'll face in a PhD, and these shouldn't be taken lightly. On the one hand, you have intellectual challenge. When moving from undergrad to master's, there isn't so much of a difference in what you're actually doing. In the undergrad, you're getting the bulk of the knowledge for a specific area. And in a master's, you're getting to the very edge of the knowledge that's available. But in a PhD, what you're tasked with is producing new knowledge. Things that we don't know that you have to ask the questions to find out. This change, and the fact that in whatever field you're in, you're going to find that it's very structured the way that you go about asking those questions and answering them, provides a huge intellectual challenge. But I've found that what's more important is the emotional challenge of the PhD. As I touched on a little bit earlier, through learning how to manage people, manage projects, manage your time, do all this and still remain yourself, still figure out how you express yourself in the world, you come up against some very challenging decisions. And you'll face difficult times when you need to make things happen, even though you feel awful. A friend of mine once told me that in doing a doctorate, you need to be open to becoming someone different as you go through the process. And I've found that's absolutely true. The emotional challenge comes mainly from being asked to do many things, many new things, and often all at once, and then feeling like you don't have enough guidance to get there. And oftentimes the power structure of the university makes it so that you feel you have very little power vis-a-vis the people you're working with. This means that sometimes you feel like you're fighting battles you can't win, and some battles aren't worth it. This can be difficult, but it can be overcome. But it's something that you're going to need to learn, along with the intellectual stuff. So how do you go about thinking about this decision? The first thing to realize is that if you're in a position to decide whether or not to do a PhD, you have many options that you can choose from. It may not seem this way, and I thought the same thing well into my PhD, but now I realize you really do have many paths to choose from. One example is entrepreneurship. Now there are more ways than ever to start your own thing. For example, a YouTube channel, selling courses online, or something else that makes use of what you already know. And if you don't think you know anything, realize that just because you have a degree, you know more than many people in your area of study. And then there are jobs that, no matter your degree, are going to be interested in having you. Management consulting is one that values achievements and the person rather than the actual thing that you got your degree in. The next thing I would say is to lay out your fundamentals. What matters most to you? What are you trying to accomplish long term? Can the PhD help you get there? What are your motivators for getting a PhD? And do those motivators line up with what the PhD can actually do for you? The important thing is to make plain what you want out of the PhD. Then to ask if your goals match the means. And finally, consider the cost of getting a PhD. There are always costs, no matter what path you take in life. In getting a PhD, this can look like living away from family for several years. And because of the way the job market in academia is, after your degree, you'll likely not have much control over where you live, meaning that you might have to live away from loved ones or friends for an extended period of time. There's also the extreme focus on a very narrow topic for several years. This is not to say that you shouldn't be other things while you're a PhD student. I think one of the worst pieces of advice is that all you can do is study and research during your PhD. You need to find avenues to be you in other ways. But your work is going to focus on one topic, or a few very closely related topics, for several years. You can also consider the money that you could have earned, saved, and invested during the time that you're getting your PhD. And finally, there are the other paths that you might be taking to get where you want to go that might lead you there better than the PhD can. Keep in mind that a PhD is not necessarily a path to wealth. Some tenured professors end up becoming wealthy, but usually through other means, not through their salary. An MBA, for example, is something much more likely to pay off in those terms. Or starting your own company, even if it's a small one and one that isn't backed by venture capital. And in some fields, a master's might do just as well for you as a PhD. In fact, in some cases, a master's is preferable to a PhD, because the PhD is more than you need, and a master's takes less time and so is a quicker path to where you want to be. On the other hand, there's the issue of credential inflation. And we don't know in the future how far this will go, what will be expected as a sort of entry-level degree for workers in 10 or 20 or 30 years. In the end, you might find that the PhD is perfect for you. Or you might find that there's a different, better way to reach your goals. For me, I decided to do the PhD because I wanted to be an academic. Things have changed since then, but I'm not upset that I'm doing it. This degree is also personally very meaningful for me, as the first generation of my family to go to college, and the first person in my family to get an advanced degree. And I'm learning so much about myself and about the world as I do it. Thanks for watching. I hope that this has demystified the PhD a little bit, and laid out a path for approaching it. If you decide to apply to grad school, you might want to take the GRE, and I've got a video here that can help you prepare for that. If you enjoyed this video, like or leave me a comment, and we'll see you in the next one.